So welcome to In Good Company. This is a short video series where we introduce you to the people behind the titles in the American Bar Association's section of dispute resolution. Today, we're getting to know David Larson, one of our section's representatives to the ABA House of Delegates. David, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad we can make this happen.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
Before we get into the questions, where are we finding you today?
Well, I'm up in the Twin Cities, so I'm in Minnesota. Um,
Well, thanks for joining and thanks for taking some time out to talk with us a little bit about you and about your role with the section. So let's start at the beginning. You're a professor of law at Mitchell Hamlin, and you're also an online dispute resolution practitioner, designer, all good things online dispute resolution. What called you to this work?
so when I graduated from law school, I started working with a litigation law firm, and this law firm had 45 litigators. And at the time I joined the firm, I was trying more cases than any other firm in the state of Minnesota, and it was intense. Every day, a third of us were in court for some reason, in a trial or a motion or something, and it was pretty stressful. I had 135 active litigation files when I left, and that's a lot of litigation files. And some were small, but some were multi-million-dollar files. And I looked around at the people in the firm, and about a third of them seemed to be managing their lives pretty effectively. There were about a third that were drinking more than they should have. There were about a third who were having affairs. So I said, okay, that's two out of three paths I don't want to go down. Um, it's just a little too intense. And shortly after I left the firm, somebody actually had a heart attack at a deposition and died, one of the firm members. So I was like, yeah, there's got to be better ways to resolve disputes than this litigation model.
Oh, wow. Well, those are all good reasons to find a different path forward. But how about the ABA? How did you find the ABA and specifically the section of dispute resolution?
Yeah, so I was at the firm a couple of years and then I started teaching. And first started teaching in a business school, Loyola University School of Business Administration in Chicago. And I started developing an industrial relations legislation course that was really a labor and employment law kind of course. So my first activity in the ABA was really through the labor and employment law section. And I really wanted to do international kinds of things. And it was very new then. They created a small international committee. So there's an international committee of the labor and employment law section that every year would travel around to different places in the world that had something happening that was consequential with labor and employment law. And I love to travel and travel internationally. So I embraced that and got active in the labor and employment law section. Um, uh, if you do labor and employment law, then you're going to get involved with the National Labor Relations Act, probably, which is a dispute resolution statute. The whole purpose of the National Labor Relations Act is industrial peace. So that immediately had me involved in the dispute resolution world. And it's negotiation. It is kind of a form of mediation. It's probably more arbitration. Most collective bargaining agreements process culminate in arbitration. And I started running with the law student division, the arbitration law competition. I was involved in that for 8 years. I chaired that committee a couple times. Then for 3 years after that, I wrote the problem for that. So I was doing a lot with arbitration law. And, I was always curious as to why that was separated from the dispute resolution section because it seemed like it belonged there. Um, but as I said, when you're doing collective bargaining work and labor relations work, where you are going to be doing a lot of negotiation, so
Mhm.
it just seemed like a natural fit to also kind of expand over to the dispute resolution section, which I did. And as soon as I got there, I was welcomed. I really liked the people I met. It was fun. I think one of the surprises about getting involved with the ABA is not only did it advance me professionally in terms of my knowledge, but honest to God was fun. I had great fun with the people I worked with. I think, our section, I've continued to be active in our section. I'm a past chair. So, I kind of worked my way up through the leadership ladder and I didn't want to leave. So I remember the House of Delegates. One of the primary reasons being, I just really enjoy the people in the section. We have a spectacularly good staff. Uh, Jen Mickle is so good. Melissa Buckley is so good. Jessica is so good. Um, and they're so nice to work with, so pleasant, so efficient. So yeah, I love working with the people in the section.
That's wonderful. So quite a rich history with the ABA and with the section. And as you mentioned previously, serving as section chair. And yes, wonderful people, both colleagues, staff, everyone, and great fun. I think we do have a lot of fun. So that's nice to hear. So let's talk about your role now. You're currently a House of Delegates representative, and that gives you a pretty unique vantage point of the section and for the ABA. For those who might not know what that means or what you do, how would you describe the role and what does it involve? And what excites you about it?
Well, House of Delegates is really kind of the policy-making arm of the American Bar Associations. They articulate those policies and resolutions.
Mhm.
The resolutions in and of themselves aren't really binding on anybody, but they are really important in terms of directing legislatures. And over the years, many ABA resolutions have been embraced by state and even the federal Congress, and have become legislation. So it's forward looking. It's problem solving. Um, it's very topical. It's exciting, as you can imagine. Right now, we're in a period of maybe unprecedented chaos in terms of our administration and what direction we're going. We never know each day what direction we're going. So, as you can imagine, there is a lot of activity and thought going into how do we protect the rule of law in this very shifting environment when there's real questions about overreach from the executive branch and a concern about whether the Congress is stepping up to its check and balance responsibility and whether the courts are doing the same. The lower courts seem to be doing that, but there's questions about what's happening at the upper level, in particular the Supreme Court. So, I think one thing that the House of Delegates is dedicated to is protecting the rule of law. That's it's just so central to a democracy that and you have to protect democracy and you have to advocate for it. And that's one thing the House of Delegates does.
It's wonderful. Yeah, so speaking of the rule of law, it makes me think, as you think about leadership in your work and your work in dispute resolution, what's the value or belief that you feel really helps guide your work and your approach to leadership?
Well, kind of going back to my personal history, the idea that there's got to be saner, healthier ways to
Mhm.
resolve disputes. Um, this litigation experience was kind of shocking to me, um, and it really had me thinking about what ways can you approach disputes more productively, and how can you increase access to justice? Because the litigation system can be very expensive and very foreboding and intimidating, and there's other ways we can make it much more inviting. We can use ombuds. We can do a lot with dispute prevention that maybe we haven't thought about as creatively as we could have. So there's so many different ways that I think we can be more effective in terms of resolving disputes than we've been. And so that's one thing that really drives me to try and capture that, to understand that, to implement that.
Yes, that's great. And thanks for the plug for ombuds.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
so
yeah, and I'll mention,
yeah.
um, I really, I embrace the fact that the role of ombuds in terms of a dispute prevention entity is really starting to get embraced. And I'm thinking specifically about colleges and universities
Mhm.
that sometimes had buds, but I think most didn't. But I think right now, as we sit here today, many universities are either hiring full-time ombuds or at least contracting out with part-time ombuds. And I think that's a really wise approach.
Well, that's wonderful. It's music to my ears. And yeah, the
Mm.
profession is, continues to evolve. And I would agree, it is an emerging area of dispute resolution, and early, I would say early dispute resolution for sure. So what advice would you give some of the people watching this video may be new to the section, or maybe they've been in this section for a while and they're not sure about moving into some of the different leadership roles?
Yeah, occasionally we have membership meetings. We just had one. That you really just want to tip your toe into it. Well, if we just have an open membership meeting, uh, you can just log on and attend one of those and kind of sit on the sideline and watch to see what's happening. A good way to get involved is to join one of the committees.
Yes.
You can just join the committee as a member. Uh, there will be a chair and a co-chair. They typically will have a kind of an agenda for what they'd like to accomplish during their terms. They will need support and help doing that. If you don't want the responsibility of being a chair or co-chair, you can just volunteer to do one of the tasks that one of your chairs or co-chairs would like to do that year. That's a really good way to get introduced to the section. You can be in more than one committee for sure. We have a whole variety of committees, so you can kind of switch around and do different ones.
Love that. That's great advice. And yes, for those watching, we have 9 committees in this coming bar year. They're free. They're part of your section membership. So as David said, yeah, get involved. Raise your hand for that one task that might seem manageable. And that's a great way to not only demonstrate your expertise and your skills, but also to get to know people and get more involved. All right, David, we're going to finish on a little bit lighter of a question before we wrap things up. Tell us something that you do outside of work that brings you joy, that keeps you grounded.
Yeah, so when I went through school, I was a baseball player. I was part of the baseball team that won the Illinois State Championship when I was in high school. I'm a lifelong Chicago Cubs fan. And, if you're a Cubs fan, you've really known the ups and downs of life. They finally did win a World Series in 2016, but I'm going back to the 1960s when I was a little kid and watching the Chicago Cubs. And if you're of this age, you will remember 1969 when the Cubs had an all-star team. They had a huge lead going to the end of the season. They just completely collapsed. Lost the pennant to the New York Mets, which I will never forgive New York for. So one thing that keeps me grounded is continuing to be a Cubs fan because it's a lifetime of hope and disappointment and recovering from disappointment. And trying to get your hope back. And this year is another example of that. Is before the All-Star break on July 15th, the Cubs had a six-game lead, 6.5 game lead in their division. It's now 1 month later, and they're now 7.5 games behind.
Oh,
They've lost,
no.
yeah, they've lost 13.5 games in this 1 month period. So it's another year of hope and disappointment and waiting until next year, I'm afraid.
And when they win, it's a big deal. And that
Oh,
feels
it's
good.
this, that
It's
was a huge celebration in 2016. But hopefully again, I'll see it again in my lifetime, but I don't know.
well, fingers
So
crossed. All right. Well, David, thank you so much. I really appreciate you joining me for this conversation. And thanks to those watching this episode of In Good Company. You can connect with David on LinkedIn, and we'll go ahead and include his profile link in the YouTube video description. And of course, we'll be tagging David on the social posts. And to all of you, please be sure to follow the ABA section of dispute resolution on social media for more conversations with our leaders. Thanks, David.
yeah, you're welcome.